Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Tacoma Cyclist. I am the Tacoma Cyclist, and with me as always is the Boogeyman, getting a little bit bigger. Today we're going to talk about how it is that riding your trainer and Zwifting, more riding your trainer, but we use Zwift, is ruining your form. And the things you can do to watch out for ruining your form, and what you can do to fix that, or things you just need to be careful of when you go back to get on the regular road. So let's jump in with some of the biggest topics that can really mess with your form. Now, there's no doubt about it. We love Zwift. We've been doing Zwift since it was beta. So we rode on Jarvis Island when that existed. Huge fans of Zwift overall, and especially during the whole lockdown situation, we've definitely taken advantage of it. There hasn't been regular road racing, so we've been using this opportunity to race on Zwift. And you can see a lot of our other race breakdowns, actual live streams of races. If you check the rest of our channel, there's some pretty good videos there for that as well. And there's no doubt that a lot of people have jumped onto the platform with the whole virus situation. It gives us gives people an opportunity to race and ride when they might not have otherwise done so. A lot of our European colleagues, they weren't even allowed out to ride their bikes, so they use this as a platform. Most of our American colleagues, we were allowed to continue riding, but we still use this, especially since it was kind of rainy season for a lot of us throughout this lockdown anyway. It just gave people a good excuse. But in doing so, there are certain things about spending so much time on a trainer that can mess with your form. Now, the Boogeyman and I get out a lot. We ride in the rain, we ride in bad weather, it doesn't really matter. But we also use Zwift because his coach has some very structured training for him. Sometimes that structured training just doesn't work where we live. We live in a very hilly area, and it's hard to maintain really consistent flat intervals if you're in a hilly area. It can be really tough. You're going down a negative 10% climb, and you're supposed to, a deep decline, and you're supposed to be doing 300 watts, and he's got junior gearing. That's pretty tough to do. So we do a lot of stuff on Zwift anyway, even when it's beautiful outside. It's not beautiful outside right now. So we're going to talk about a few of the following things. Your bike angle on the trainer and how that impacts you when you climb, what the climbing capabilities on Zwift, or your how you and your body and your bike react when you climb. Same thing about sprinting, how your body and your bike react in sprinting, real world versus fake world, Zwift world. Your cadence, big one for me. Your upper body setup and just how you do your positioning on the bike in general. These are all things that can differ greatly in Zwift world versus the real world. So we're going to explore a couple of those and then show you how they're impacted by sitting on the trainer. Okay, so one of the first things that you'll notice about any trainer setup is that the trainer isn't going to set your bike perfectly level in comparison to real world, real life. In fact, typically it's going to kind of tilt it down. And tilting your bike down and your trainer down, your saddle down, has a tendency to push you forward. And pushing you forward is really the last thing you want to do on a trainer. It's going to rock your pelvis forward. It's going to put you into a bad position on the nerve. It's going to kind of give you the numb giblets, and we don't like those. Those are really, really bad. So it also can give you numb hands. So if you're wondering if you've got this sensation of numbness in the nether regions, if you've got numb hands, check the level of your saddle, check the level of your bike to see what's going on there. Now, bear in mind, your top tube is not level. Your saddle is probably not level. So what you're used to on the road is not level. I would suggest you measure it using a level while it's on flat ground first, preferably in the same room as your trainer. So that way, if your floor is slightly tilted, most of them are, you actually get the same sense as to where the bike should be. Now, in my case, I'm going to pan the camera down here and see if you can see this, but it's a little bit of a mess. But you can see I've got a wheel chock underneath of there, and that's just a standard, $7 Amazon special. It does not put the bike at dead level, and that's something that I actually prefer. I actually prefer the bike to be ever so slightly tilted up. In general, it keeps me so that my pelvis is a little bit further back. It also can make that stretch from the saddle to the bars feel a little bit less. So in general, my upper body can be a little bit more relaxed. I tend to do a lot of climbing anyway, so having that in that tilted position works well for me. Now there's an app that I like, and there's plenty of apps that'll do this very thing. So you can go on your Apple Play Store or Apple whatever App Store, Google Play Store, and take a look for this app. It's called Saddle Adjustment, or I don't know. It's this guy right here. Let's see. Saddle Adjust. There you go. Saddle Adjust by bikecomputer.co. And it shows you the position of where your saddle should be. It also gives you the option to calibrate. Now, if I hit calibrate right now, it'll mess everything up because I'm not on the ground. But I've already calibrated it. So what I want to do is I want to take this and I want to align the phone, or the image on the phone, with the actual saddle. Now, in this particular case, my saddle is showing at a 2.9 degree tilt up. And you can always just verify by tilting down and seeing which way, but it'll show you in general which way your saddle is positioned. Now in this case, 2.9 up is, I typically run about -1, -0.9 to -1 for the nose down while riding on the road. So when I set this bike flat on the ground, I'm at -0.9 or -1. So I'm slightly tilted down. Now that's huge exaggeration. So this is up about 3 degrees, but it's up a total of about 4 degrees from what I'm used to. But again, what that does is that brings the bike back, brings the upper body back, and it allows me to kind of sit with my pelvis further rotated back to keep me from leaning too far forward. I have had that problem with the numb giblets, and it's not fun. This alleviates that problem for me completely. It may not be the solution for you, but what you should do is at least get this app, or an app like it, just a digital bubble level, and see where your bike needs to be for it to work. Stick some books or magazines underneath of that front wheel, or drop to the ground. See what works best for you. But bear in mind that the tilt of the front of the bike is probably one of the most critical pieces of your trainer setup so that you can get into a comfortable position. And it is hopefully going to set the tone for everything moving forward. So one of the things that the tilt of the bike is really going to impact is also the feeling of the upper body. So in this case, the angle of the boogeyman is actually pretty decent. Bust out our trusty goniometer here. And he's sitting at about 105 to 110 degrees of angle. Now, if he was to actually get into a more aero position, like he were actually riding in a race, then we're pretty close to 90 degrees. We're at about 96 degrees, which is actually pretty solid for traditional upper body positioning. However, on a trainer, it can feel significantly harder to hold this particular position, as it feels awkward in general. On the road, it feels a little bit less awkward, but a lot of that comes down to the tilt of the bike. Now, you're not going to be able to ever get the bike perfectly flat, or maybe you can if you spend a lot of time adjusting shims or whatever. But it doesn't really matter anyway, because on the actual road, your bike is never perfectly flat, or very rarely perfectly flat. So you're always going up, down, which gives you that feeling of variation in that upper body. On the trainer, you don't get that. Now, you might argue, well, what if I've got the Wahoo kicker climb? Well, then you're awesome. Congratulations. And we don't have it. A lot of people don't have it. We have the Gen 2 Wahoo kicker, and it came out on the Gen 3. Now, if I had known the Gen 3 was literally coming out 1 week after we bought the Gen 2, I would have waited 1 freaking week, especially since they didn't actually ship our Gen 2 until 3 weeks after the Gen 3 released. So thanks, appreciate that. In any case, we have the Gen 2. You don't get the Wahoo kicker climb with that. But if you don't have that, which a lot of people don't, who's going to spend that kind of money unless you've just got money floating around, then you don't have that up-down. You don't have that forward mobility on the front of your bike. So this position can feel kind of awkward. Well, then what's the first thing you're going to do is you're going to spend a lot of time either shifting position In this case, you can see the boogeyman's actually got a very bad hand position. I've been getting onto him about this, folding the hands in, and that's because on the trainer, you get tired of sitting in this position and you tend to rock your hands in. So not great. I'll forgive him for that. Hopefully his coach isn't watching the video. The other thing you might do is maybe sit on the tops. Sit on the tops. Oh, there you go. He takes instruction well. You might even go full fromy. You might even go full froomy. Good, good, okay. Super pro. But you do a lot of manipulating of your body to get into the proper upper body position here, to feel good. Now, unfortunately, that also means that you do a lot of this too. And if you're doing this, you may as well be doing this too. Or heck, you may as well even be doing this. Reality is, when you're riding on the road, you may sit up and ride no-handed. You may sit up and ride in this position from time to time, but this is not a position where you are putting out power. This is not a position in a race. This is not a position in a group ride. You really shouldn't be riding like this on the outside, unless you're just sitting up to cool your legs off. But unfortunately, on the trainer, you're going to find quite frequently that you use this as a rest position because there's no consequence to it. But the reality is, on the road, there's a consequence to this. You're not getting fitness benefits. You're not working the muscle groups you need to be working. So if you're spending any appreciable amount of time on this, you may as well be drinking that coffee after all. Now I've moved out of the way here so you can see what the boogeyman's doing on a climb here. This is just the standard Wahoo climb. It's nothing special. He's doing 8%. You may be able to see the screen in there, and my hand apparently too. You may be able to see the screen in there. But he's doing 7-8%. This is not how the boogeyman climbs out on the road. And even if he were attacking this climb, which I'm not going to ask him to do, we just did a Zwift race and we're both kind of tired, but even if you were attacking this climb, this is not how you climb on the road. You tend to shift your body a little bit while you're riding. You tend to move around a little bit more in your seat. You're going to do a lot more up-down action depending upon where you need to be. The trainer is not very realistic, but on top of that, I'm going to have the boogeyman get out of the saddle. When you're climbing out of the saddle, you're doing more upper body stuff than what's being shown here. So the boogeyman's really not doing much with his upper body other than holding onto the bars. He's doing almost everything with his lower body, and the bike itself is not moving. Again, yes, you may have a rocker plate, you may have some of these things that shift your bike one way or the other, but unfortunately, even with the rocker plates, they don't do enough lateral movement. I think the Kurt Kinetic one is probably pretty good with regards to that, but even still, it doesn't do a great job of mimicking that out of the saddle, rocking side to side, and the ability to kind of pull up on the bars on the opposite side of your leg going down to give you that counter force. So he can sit back down now. Unfortunately, you know, climbing on Zwift really is not all that representative of climbing on the real road. Is it good enough? Yeah, probably. Just bear in mind that it's not the same. So if you're super excited about your time on Alpe Zwift, cool. But go do it on the actual Alpe Zwift, or Alpe d'Huez, and and I think you're going to find that your time's going to be different unless you just climb all the time and you're just used to it. It's just a different experience overall. One other challenge presented by Zwift is that, and this is really a function of the trainer, not of Zwift. Again, many of these things are functions of the trainer. Resistance on a trainer is different than resistance on the road. It just is. And what that does is it creates this false sense of pushback that you may not get on the road. And that pushback can be kind of exponential. So the harder you push, the harder the trainer pushes back on you. Again, this is just the way trainers work. It's no fault of Zwift or any other platform. It just is the way that it is. But what that does is the higher the cadence you push, oftentimes the more difficult it is to push higher cadence. So the Boogeyman and I tend to run relatively high cadences on the road, partly because we have the hearts of small rabbits. His maximum heart rate is in the 230s, mine's in the upper 2 teens. So we tend to ride higher cadence more than higher power, plus, or than grinding a gear. But on Zwift, that tends to be very difficult. Now, in some of the conversations I've had, some people say, well, it's because, in Zwift you don't really coast that often, and therefore you're kind of grinding and you don't have that up-down average. I get that, but at the same time, when I do my analysis of actual races versus Zwift races, I'll have a very consistent 85 to 90 RPM on a Zwift race, and in a real live race, anywhere between 95 and 110. And in real races, I actually do stop pedaling from time to time. So in theory, my average cadence should be lower, not higher, but my cadences are generally higher on actual road races. I tend to find that I settle in around 80 to 85 RPM, and then when I go back to the actual road, it's sometimes very difficult for me to get back up to speed with a higher cadence without actively working on it. So something you should be mindful of while you're working out on your trainer is to focus on that, keep your cadence up. And that may mean that you have to turn an easier gear than you think by 1 gear, but it's totally worth it. And that kind of brings us to our final point here. And this is really the final of any Zwift race or any real race, and that is sprinting. Now, if you've watched any of my videos, you know that I don't sprint. I suck at sprinting. I can climb all day. I can't sprint. Will here can sprint pretty well. He can climb pretty well, so that works really well for him. I'm not going to ask him to do a huge sprint because, again, we just got done with this Zwift race and we're tired. But I am going to ask him to do a little bit of a sprint. And what I want you to notice, again, no fault of Zwift. This is really more about the trainer and the limitations thereof. Notice the body positioning on the bike. Notice the bike itself. There is no movement on the bike. So whenever the Boogeyman's ready to go for that sprint, he can spin it up and sprint. But I want you to watch 2 things. If you can see the cadence on the screen, which you should be able to, look at that, but also look at the fact that the only movement that's really happening in this sprint, and I'm only going to ask him to do maybe 600-700 watts on this sprint, the only movement is up-down motion on the legs themselves, not side to side, and that's going to make a huge difference. So whenever the Boogeyman's ready, okay. So a pretty decent little sprint there. 700 watts, give or take there for about 10 seconds. But a couple of the things that we noticed is that his cadence never really got that high, 110. Now, if you know anything about Junior's gearings, which I do have a video on Junior's gearing elsewhere on my channel, and bad shifting apparently. If you know anything about Junior's gearing, you know that it tops out at 52.14. In a regular sprint, the Boogeyman will do cadences of 140, 150 RPM for a 700, 800, 900 watt sprint. But this kind of limits him. He's going to have a more difficult time doing more than maybe 115. And on top of that, there's no ability to be able to use that right-left rocking motion from the handlebars to assist the legs. So a full-on sprint. And by the way, NorCal Cycling, if you check out some of his videos, he even talks about this very thing. The fact that sprints just don't work the same in Zwift because you can't do that. Again, not a failure of Zwift, it's a failure of the physics of the bike trainers themselves. So, what does all that mean? Does that mean you should not Zwift? No, not at all. In fact, the Boogeyman and I are huge fans of Zwift. As far as we're concerned, it's saved our race season. It's made it worth competing. It's made it worth kind of doing. We still love riding. We've already put in about 5,000 miles this year. It's been a blast. But a lot of those miles have been on the trainer. And a lot of them have been on Zwift. All of the trainer miles have been on Zwift. We use it as a complete, total package. So what does it mean for you? Well, be mindful of the things we talked about. Watch for your bike positioning, watch for your saddle positioning, watch for your upper body. Make sure it's adjusted well. These things are going to help you when you go to translate this back to being on the road again and back to being in a regular race. It does feel weird to, if you've been doing nothing but trainer time, to jump back on the road. So take it for what it's worth. This is not me saying don't use Zwift. Use it, just be mindful of the limitations of it, and well, hey, ride on. So that's it for now. Thank you very much for checking out this video, and feel free to take a look at some of the race breakdowns that we've done and some of the live streams. We love live streaming some of our races, especially those in the WSBA region, Washington State Bicycle Association. I should have had the boogeyman do the sprint here. But stay tuned, subscribe. We love to get subscribers. We're getting really close to 1,000 subscribers, so that'd be awesome. And be sure to give us a thumbs up. If you want to see different videos, if you have questions, put them down in the comments. And then, like I said, check us out on live streams, because I will answer questions while we're doing live streams. I keep the live comments up and running, so if you have questions and questions you want answered, I'll talk to them there. So for now, thanks again. We appreciate you stopping by. See you later.